We really shouldn't just assume that someone's mental state is okay. It's really important that we think before we speak. If you have nothing nice to say, then don't say it. Hey guys, I'm Averie, a member of Young Rebellion, and on today's episode on this channel, it is actually about anxiety. So, as this is still kind of a mukbang video, I've basically ordered a ton of cakes from a cafe called Coffee Smith. So, today we have the truffle chocolate cake, the red velvet cake, the rainbow cake, a cheesecake, a tiramisu cake, as well as a sea salt caramel cake. So basically what I did was I put up a Q&A onto my Instagram story asking people to send in their opinions or any questions that they have regarding anxiety. So yeah, basically today I'm really just gonna answer the questions or opinions that were sent in and give my own response or opinions on it. But before I actually start answering any of the questions, I do have something important to say. All of my responses towards the questions or opinions that were sent in are purely my opinion, and it doesn't reflect on any official authorities. And yeah, with that, let's just begin. Alright, the first cake is the chocolate truffle cake. And the first question that I'm answering is, when is having anxiety okay? Okay, honestly, not a big fan of chocolate, but it's pretty good. Right, I want to start answering this question by saying that if you do have anxiety, it is completely okay and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Right, so when is having anxiety okay? I don't feel like there's such a thing as a proper time to have anxiety because it's really not something that you can control. But I would say that a majority of the time, we start to kind of feel and experience anxiety when we are, for example, in a pressured environment. Sometimes it also kind of just depends on the people around you, if they have been like pushing you too much and stressing you too much. When it comes to these environments and the people, it's usually what pushes someone to have anxiety. So yeah, regarding the question, there's not really a specific time where anxiety kind of just happens. I think it depends on the environment you have been in or the people that you have been surrounding yourself with. Right, and our next question is, how do I tell if I have anxiety or if I'm just worrying? Right, I think that worrying tends to be more about overthinking about situations or things in our heads, whereas anxiety has more physical symptoms. For example, being restless, your muscles start feeling tense, your body kind of goes into this like fight or flight mode. Right, so I think the biggest difference that could help you differentiate between whether you're worrying or whether you're actually experiencing anxiety would be how much your body is physically responding to the situation that you are in. So the second cake that I'm trying is the red velvet cake. And our next question, which is the third question, is, many people may face anxiety, but they don't show it. Right, fun fact. I think this is the very first time I'm trying anything that is red velvet flavored, whether it's a cake or a cupcake, and I kind of regret not trying it sooner. But anyway, I definitely feel that many people face anxiety but don't show it, which is why I feel like we really shouldn't just assume that someone's mental state is okay and then kind of make jokes with them that might potentially hurt their feelings or cause them to overthink. When it comes to these kinds of jokes, it can really be as simple as making a joke about someone's appearance, and the person making the joke might think like, oh yeah, it's fine, I'm really close to this person, they'll just know that I'm joking. The reality is that unless you have sat down with the person that you are joking with and you know what kind of mental state they're going through, you can't just assume that it will be okay. Which is why, like, I kind of want to say as well that it's really important that we think before we speak. We kind of need to make sure that we are careful with our words, especially around certain people, whether you know that they're going through a tough time and everything. And a piece of advice that I kind of grew up with, because when I was younger, I used to be pretty blunt with my words. My dad kind of came up to me at one point and just gave me this piece of advice that I kind of keep with me even until now, which was, if you have nothing nice to say, then don't say it, which of course will be for certain situations. So the next cake that I'll be trying is actually the rainbow cake. And the next question that I'll be answering is, what triggers the anxiety? And what are some symptoms of anxiety? I think this one's a bit too sweet for me. But yeah, I think I kind of mentioned a bit earlier. Sometimes I really think that it's the environment that we are in that can trigger anxiety, especially if the environment is very stressful. It could be a big event that had happened in your life, or it could be a build-up of smaller stressful situations that you've kind of experienced as well. That I think that kind of build-up just triggers anxiety sometimes. And again, some of the symptoms of anxiety would be the more physical ones, like feeling stressful, feeling scared, your heartbeat starts to really increase. And there are a lot more that I'm sure you guys can kind of Google to get like more deeper information. But I think these are kind of the more common ones, and which are all physical as well, like I mentioned earlier. So moving on to our next question. How do I combat anxiety? Okay, I'll list some of the short-term methods first. So firstly, I think you can try to take deep breaths. Focus on breathing in and out evenly. I think secondly, you can try to distract yourself as well from the situation. For example, watching a funny video on YouTube, or just leaving the room to kind of walk around to try and clear your head to distract yourself from the situation. Right, so those are some of the short-term methods, but if you want some long-term methods, you could try fact-checking your thoughts, or try retraining your brain to think of a more positive perspective. For example, let's say that you have a upcoming presentation. Instead of thinking things like, oh my god, I'm not gonna do well, I'm confirm gonna fail, try to think from a more positive perspective. For example, okay, I'm nervous, but I'm prepared. Some things may go well, some things may not go well. This method of rethinking your fears can kind of help to retrain your brain to come up with a more positive way to deal with your anxious thoughts. Of course, there's also the option of going to seek professional help as long as you are comfortable with it, and especially if it's been occurring for a long time. Right, so the next cake that I'm trying is the cheesecake. And the question that we're now answering is there stigma surrounding anxiety? And if so, what? I mean, it's not bad. I think I prefer my mom's version. Right, so I believe that there is definitely some social stigma surrounding anxiety. I think some people still have those negative views towards people with anxiety, and they might not feel as comfortable with them. And this kind of results in discrimination because they kind of see people with anxiety as people with a personal weakness. And I don't feel like this is true. Anxiety doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone of any age. It doesn't affect weak people, nor is it like a sign of weakness. And I think that this perception especially needs to change, because it kind of means that those suffering from anxiety kind of get worried about seeking support because they're worried about how people might view them. And the next cake that I'm trying is the salted caramel cake. And the next question is, the older generation doesn't understand what anxiety is, and they often make one do the things that their children don't want to do. It's actually not that bad. It's not too salty, it's not too sweet. Right, so I feel that this is probably due to what the older generation kind of grew up with. I don't think they're as exposed to anxiety and issues like this as much as we are today. So I think that if you are truly unhappy with what's going on, with all the things they are trying to force you to do, the only thing you can really try to do is try to sit down with them and truly get them to understand what you're going through. Explain to them slowly, like, why it's affecting you, what you're going through, why you would much rather them not kind of pressure you into do those kinds of things. Right, now moving on to our next one. People should not downplay anxiety because it isn't easy for the person facing it to overcome. Right, so I think that this particular opinion is actually very true. Like I mentioned earlier, some people just think that it's a sign of personal weakness and therefore they think that it's not that big of a deal. And this kind of only makes it harder for the person facing anxiety. For example, some people might just brush over the topic of anxiety and say things like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal, you'll just get over it. And it's things like this that can really make the person overthink, like, oh, is it really not that big of a deal? Am I just exaggerating? So I just want to say that if you do have anxiety, don't be confused by what people are telling you. You know your own body and your own mind enough to know what you're going through. So don't let people tell you how you are feeling, because realistically only you will know best. So just don't doubt yourself. Right, so moving on. This is the last cake I'll be trying actually, which is the tiramisu cake. And it's also actually the last question that I'll be answering for today, which is, how could we better educate people about what it's like to have anxiety and that we can't just turn it off? Okay, I can't lie, the tiramisu is my favorite kind of cake, so I've literally just been waiting for this all day. But yeah, regarding the question, I think that broadcasts and media companies can try to touch on these topics more. On TV especially, like we mentioned earlier, the older generation isn't as exposed to this kind of thing, which is why they might not understand us as much. I think on TV especially, the older generation uses it more than YouTube. And by putting it on TV, I think it can really reach that like audience that has kind of been less exposed to it. And as for the younger generation, I think there could be more exposure maybe at an early stage in schools, maybe through talks and stuff. And I think this is really just to ensure that they grow up with this kind of information and awareness. I think overall in general, we really just need people to be more exposed to the topic, and I think that level of exposure could really help people to start understanding people with anxiety. Right, so with that, I've answered all the questions that I received. So hopefully my answers or responses to your submissions were okay. If you may have felt that I may have offended you in any way, I do apologize, that was not my intention. And do feel free to leave a comment down below about your own opinions, or if you had anything that you wanted to say in reply to some of my responses. And of course, if you had any other questions that you would have liked to ask me that I didn't manage to answer, you can put them down in the comments as well, and I will try to answer them as soon as possible. And with that, thank you for watching today's episode on anxiety, and do make sure to subscribe to Young Rebellion for more content like this. If you liked the video, do make sure to hit the like button as well. Also, make sure that you turn notifications on this channel so that you'll be notified of when the next video is uploaded. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching.